You should have parked your bloody Fiesta down there. Bypass is a 2014 social realist film written and directed by Duane Hopkins. It follows a period in the life of a working class lad played by George MacKay in a decaying industrial town, trying to keep his life and his younger sister's life together while everything's sort of falling apart around him.
Work if you're interested.
He offered you something, didn't he?
So yes, this is another social realist film, but as I talked about in the Nocturnal review, there is a lot of scope for sort of exploring that genre and expanding it and doing more interesting things with it. And I was kind of referring to this film when I said that there are other instances that I'll be reviewing, but this is the main one that really struck me as doing something different and interesting and stimulating.
I need some money.
What for?
Food at school.
Yeah, because this is the sort of thing that could be sort of the sort of plot of this film could be sort of considered poverty porn. It is similar to Ken Loach's recent work, where it sort of just keeps piling misery on top of misery. But because this comes at it from such a new and stimulating way, it didn't irk me in the way that Ken Loach did, and because it didn't feel like it's pushing. It didn't feel like it was pushing a political thing. It's much more pushing a personal thing and a personal experience of these things that are happening, without really necessarily saying something about it. It approaches it in several different ways that are new to this genre. The cinematography, for a start, it doesn't do the sort of objective wide-angle shots where it's giving us a window into there, even though the script on the surface would read that way, which is what makes it social realist. Is that we are seeing a window into someone's life, but the way that it's presented isn't that simple, objective sort of distance way. It's very up close and it's very personal. It uses there's a lot of quadrant framing in there, which like usually if it's framed like that and he's down in this corner, like usually you would just get that, and the thing that would sort of make the world seem bigger was people coming in and out of the frame and the camera moving sometimes, so you get that bigger picture. But sort of using the quadrant framing means that there's a lot more negative space around him, which kind of makes sense, especially that times where someone's staring and then there's just a big void behind them. It shows the sort of emptiness of the area around them and the decay and stuff like that. And it also makes you more attentive of that. So that there's a scene where the main character played by George MacKay is talking to his brother on sort of an underpass thing, and you have this sort of the whole city and all this industry that's all sort of, most of it's abandoned now and being sold to China and stuff in the background during that conversation, and it just gives it that bit more. It gives you that bit more of a lived in feel, and it's not that normal a thing to do as well. So it's, like I said in Angst, how the camera angles in that give it a very unique and different view because you haven't seen them anywhere else. This is sort of putting you in a realistic world but giving you a different sort of psychological approach to it. Also uses these sort of extreme close-ups with very, very shallow focus in a way that Upstream Colour did as well, to focus on very small movements and gestures, very personal things and personal artifacts that are spread around and things that you see like that. I mean, if you haven't seen Upstream Colour, it's definitely not the sort of film that we review on here. It's a very sort of cerebral, abstract, arty film about lofty ideas that a lot of people didn't really grasp. I didn't fully get the film, but I felt emotionally I was on the same page, but I couldn't explain it. So this film's definitely like that visual approach is completely alien to social realism. And I talked about in the last 3 reviews as well how I didn't like that it was that film was sort of realistic but then had these stylistic flourishes. But like in this case, it's the visuals are even more arty than the last 3, but the reason it works is because it's consistent all the way through, and it's the psychology of it which comes through in the editing as well.
Probably.
Instead of you sort of just getting the objective distance view, you're getting this very deep dive into the sort of psychology of poverty. And on a side note, I read a book the other week called Poverty Safari that also does that.
It's the book tries to not just talk about, oh, this is like in a scheme. It tries to say this is what it's like. This is why we can't ascend. These are the things that hold us back from taking a rightful place in culture.
It goes into sort of how these things do pile on top of each other. It's not just mounting debts, it's mounting stress, it's cultural pressure, all these things that the films don't tend to go into that much. They just, like the films of Ken Loach don't go into that sort of depth with the characters because it's all about blaming the system and blaming and pushing a political ideology. This film and the book Poverty Safari go much deeper into that, and it's like there was that dickhead recently who posted a tweet of a meal in a pan saying, "Oh, poor people can't feed their kids." Well, I've just made this for £4 from Asda. And it things like, oh, that's going to solve it. Just this surface thing like poverty is just about buying a meal a day. Like, he completely ignored that most of the food that he bought was reduced, so isn't guaranteed every day. How did he get to the shop? Did he drive? Is his car MOT'd, insured, taxed? How did he didn't get there for free? Did he make his own clothes or did he buy them? Did he own his own house? Did he have to pay bills in the house? Where did the electricity come from to heat the food? You know what I mean? It's not. It seems to, if you boil it down to something really simple like that and ignore all the rest, it doesn't make any sense at all. But this film is trying to do that. It's trying to get deeper into that psychology and show the sort of the daily toil of sort of every aspect of stress that's building up, and not just events and money and stuff like that. It's getting a lot deeper into there, and the cinematography reflects that, and the editing as well. It's not. Things aren't just happening in one linear line here. The editing jumps backwards and forwards, and what's interesting about it is that there's a sort of thing about realism that it is objective and it's supposed to be happening in real time. Like, there's that famous scene in Umberto D where someone's just trying to strike a match for ages, and it doesn't actually serve any purpose other than to sell you this idea of realism. And like Jim Jarmusch said in his films as well, that when he watches a film and someone says, so there's someone sat in a room and they just suddenly go, "Oh, I've got it," and then it cuts to them in a car driving somewhere. He's more interested in how they got to the car. Like, did they put the jacket on? Did they put the jacket on and think, no, that's not the right jacket for this occasion? Did they lock the door? Did they leave the light on to avert burglars? Realism is supposed to be concerned with those moments, the in between moments, and the everyday reality. But this film sort of does the opposite. With the editing, sort of jumps back and forth because it's so. You're so close to this person and so in their mind that you're seeing what's important to him and not the unimportant things. So it's sort of subverting realism. You get this sort of more of a stream of consciousness where he's just remembering moments from his past, moments from the day before, and they're just all leaping out and they're all driven by emotion. It reminded me of Ulysses by James Joyce. Sometimes things just pop up and come back, pop up and disappear. And it's not all linear. It's like when you're walking along and you suddenly think... I do this weird thing where I'm walking along and I see a number plate and I'll just read it in my head for no reason. I've no idea why I do that. But I'll be thinking about something and then just go F664HIH and then carry on thinking to myself. I don't know what that is, but I do it. But yeah, that's the sort of thing it's doing with that. And it also messes with time. There's a moment in this where a character is chased by the police and... It all suddenly gets very hectic, and then he runs up, and then he gets to the fence, and then it goes into slow motion as he's climbing the fence because the danger's escalated there. And as soon as he gets over, it's back to running again. So it messes with it like that, because like how people have said when they're in a car crash, suddenly everything else goes away, and it seems to go in slow motion because you've shut down everything else to focus on that one danger. It works like that, so it's all psychological. And it's all subjective. It's all new to social realism. It works really well. Yeah, there's also a chase scene later on it's one of my favourite chase scenes now. It's one of only 3 now that I know that are chase scenes that are driven by emotion, not thrills. And it's a really strange approach to it. Because I saw that and I just thought, oh, I could do that. And you never think that when you're seeing a chase scene, because usually there's, you can tell that they've had to shut a whole motorway, they've had to hire police cars, there's all helicopter shots, all this really fancy stuff to get this sort of thrill of a chase scene. And this film's almost all done in close-ups and very quick, just little buzzing things like the wing mirrors rattling because they're driving so fast, and the intensity of it's just building up because you know the risks to that character, and his mental state isn't great at that point, that he's ill, and when the car pulls up, he's going to have to run. And he's getting iller and iller through there, and he's not going to get away. The tension just keeps ratcheting up because of how personal it is, and it's not just thrills though. It is thrilling, but it's thrilling in a more horror sort of way. I thought that was amazing. Like, so many of these things have kind of been done before, but never from this angle. And it just changes so much. Just changing the perspective and putting the extra thought into that just changes so much about it and makes it so much of a different film than it could have been if it was done very simply. It could have still been a fine film if it was done with the sort of objective distance camera work and not gone as deep psychologically into the character. It could have been that, but it's gone somewhere else and done something even more amazing.
Alright, Mark, it's Tim. Managed to get rid of most. Getting behind.
Just I love it. I just thought that everything that was different and interesting and deeper about it I just found so stimulating. Like even the title, I'm not even sure what bypass means. The title, it's never explained. Like my reading of it, which is probably wrong, is that it shows the main character George MacKay and his brother like struggling, and they are stood on that sort of bypass at one point and saying no, there's nothing out there for us now. This area is just deprived and it's dead. And there's a bit where they visit. The brother visits the grandfather, and the grandfather's talking about, when I left school and walked straight into a job for life. I went to the pub and I hung around with these same people my whole life, and there's opportunities out there anymore. And there isn't a middle generation in here. Like his mother is in it very briefly. She does nothing. The father's sort of mentioned but isn't really there, which that's part of the psychological pressure on him, is that his father wasn't there and he has to succeed where his father failed. And there is this middle generation there that really did fuck all. And then they share memes saying, oh well, we're getting blamed for climate change, but when we were younger we had glass bottles and we took them back, and we had paper bags, and we stayed out and played in the streets until midnight, and we didn't lock the doors because the locks were made of string and all this shit. And it's like, no one's disputing that though. No one's disputing the world you were given to you by your parents. They're disputing what you're handing over to your kids, and then why you're telling your kids that they've fucked up the world when they've not even left school yet. Anyway, God, I don't know where that came from. It's probably not what the film is about, but it's good that it stimulated me to think that and to put those pieces together from it, because there is some truth to that. Anyway, I did want to go into more depth. With this film and give more examples, but I can't find a proper physical copy of it anywhere. It's only available on Amazon Prime Video for some reason. I think that they intentionally sort of distributed it themselves rather than going through the system, which probably explains why it's so different. I don't know, maybe if they'd have taken this to the BFI, it would have turned out more like the film I was describing it could have been, that was more like what we've seen before. So I don't know if there might be some element of rebellion to it. I hope there is. Anyway, Bypass, I loved it. It's definitely a 9 out of 10. I loved the performances. George MacKay, I saw him in the True History of the Kelly Gang the other day as well. He's a really incredible actor. He's really good at he can be really physical, but he can be really internal as well. I think he's great. He's a great actor, and I like that he's making films like this that not many people are seeing. Even as he's getting bigger and more successful, he seems really interested in the British film industry, which is great. So yeah, it's a 9 out of 10 for me. Unfortunately, you can't buy it or rent it anywhere, but if you've got Amazon Prime, which most people have, you can watch it on there. That's where I watched it. I've watched it twice now. I wish I could get a copy and give it a proper appraisal. But anyway, that's it for now. Go watch it on Prime. You've already seen it? Tell us about it. Have a natter in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back next week with another Reviews on Realism. Goodbye.